We're about, probably it took me maybe like 5 minutes to walk to Lake Michigan. So it was a quiet town, nothing going on there. And that's where I lived with my parents, both of them, my mother and my father, until I was 7. And when we lived there, I guess I have to kind of describe the land that we lived on because it was really beautiful. It was a wooded, really beautiful woodland with a marsh. So on this side, you see nothing but flowers and trees and ravines and shaded trees. And this side, you have like the marsh where there's like lily pads and flowers and all that types of stuff.
Sounds wonderful.
So it's beautiful. It's beautiful, but the house we lived in, it was hell. It was hell. It really was. The house we lived in, it was a old cabin that somebody had. It had a wraparound porch, and somebody had enclosed the porch around it. So now it's like one big room, and then you have this room going around it with like the kitchen and what would have maybe been a living room, and then another area in the bathroom. It was terrible, but there's holes in the ceiling. Like you can look up and see the sky. My father, he put a tarp up there so it wouldn't rain on our heads, but that didn't really work out when it was raining because it still rained on our heads. You can look up, see all the joists, rafters, there's rats everywhere. We had rats the size of, like I got bit by a rat. So we were poor. Long story short, we were really, really poor. My father was an alcoholic. I think he spent probably all our money on beer and whatnot, but I think even if he wasn't an alcoholic, things still would have been really bad. I learned about my father's abuse, some of it when I was younger, but also I learned about it when I was older as well because I was trying to figure out, what the fuck happened to me? And so when you're trying to figure out what happened to you, you have to go on this journey, and I had to ask a lot of questions, not of my father. I asked my mother, I asked my father's family, and they all had different things to tell me. And once they told me, it made a lot of sense. My father starved me. Food. Like, he starved me in a lot of ways, but food is one way, and I mean starving. Like, I was outside eating bugs, eating plants. In the wintertime, there's not a lot to eat outside, so I was eating dog food. Sometimes one of our dogs, they'd kill a chipmunk, and I'd get to eat a chipmunk. Every couple of days, I did get a bowl of white rice. I had 2 older sisters. They went to school, so I guess they ate breakfast and lunch at school. They ate during the week, and I was the youngest. They're 2 and 3 years older than me. So I spent most of my time outside just looking for food or trying to like stay hidden away from my father because he was abusive in a lot of ways. Not just he didn't just starve me. He was physically and sexually abusive, but he was also really explosive. He had this explosive anger, like you just had to hide from, you had to be silent, you had to stay out of his way because you didn't know like what was going to happen to you if he noticed you. So you didn't want to get noticed. And my mom, she was given to him when she was 14 years old and he was 24. And I say given because her parents drove her from Michigan to Florida where my father was at. And while they were driving down there, her mother told her that they're all going down there, but one of them isn't coming back. And that happened to be my mother. And my mother had been getting sexually abused by her own father, and her own mother was jealous of her because I guess, you know, her husband that she loved wanted his own daughter. And so her mother was extremely abusive towards her because of that jealousy. Like she dressed her in Goodwill clothes or her dad's old baggy clothes. And my mother's siblings would get to wear brand new clothes from the mall. You know, she'd give my mom cold showers all the time, like purposely. She treated my mom like the house slave. It was bad for my mom, and her mother just wanted to get rid of her. You know, I guess so she could have her husband back. And so she was given away to my dad. And my dad turned out to be worse than her own father, but so my mom didn't know anything better for many, many years. So she lives in her parents' house to my dad, and he's even worse than her own father. But she's married to this man now, and she thinks that she can't lose him because she's married to him, and she thinks that like she can't get away, like she has no other option and has to stay married. So they came back to Michigan about a year after they'd been married, and she asked her mom to like help her leave. She said, "I want to leave him." And her mother told her, "No, you can't leave him," because at the time she was pregnant with my oldest sister. And she said, if you leave him, then the baby's going to be born with her father's name, like her father's last name. And she didn't want, you know, she's like, what are people going to say if your baby's born with, you know, with your last name? It needs to have, you know, my father's last name, not her own father's last name. And so, you know, my mom had to stay with him. And then when she had my middle sister, there were still rumors that my middle sister was fathered by her own father. Like there was nothing she could do to fight those rumors. So if that doesn't tell you what was going on, you know, with my mom and her dad, like her dad, he was a real piece of work as well. I guess I'll get around to him. But so my mom, back to that, so she went from the abuse that she experienced with her own father, her own mother, to my father. And it stunted her growth emotionally. The way I said I would hide when my father was around, my mother would do the same thing. She would run around when she could hear his car coming up the driveway when he was coming back from work. She'd run around the house, race around and hide in closets and dive under clothes. Like she'd hide behind this big mirror that we had that stood up. Like she would hide like a child. And this was his wife that was hiding from him. Sometimes she would shit herself. A grown woman hiding from her husband, afraid. That's what he did. That's how he terrorized us, though. That's how scary he was. So yeah, my mom was always hiding and quiet. She didn't speak. It was like she was a ghost most of the time because she wasn't there for me. I don't understand now, but when I was a kid, I didn't understand why she was so quiet, why she didn't want to talk, why she didn't hug me, you know, why she didn't kiss me. And, you know, I found out, well, I was there, you know, I witnessed her abuse. My clearest memory that I have is not something I saw, but something I heard. But I had seen it enough, but I heard it the most. It was at night, and I would be asleep. I slept on this couch that we had in our kitchen. I didn't have my own room. It was just a cot by the door in the kitchen. And I would listen to my mom begging my father to hit her. His name is Chessie, so she would say, hit me, Jesse, just hit me already. Hit me, hurry up, just go ahead and do it. And that's what I would hear, like when I'm trying to go to sleep and my mom is begging and crying for him to hurry up and hit her, because he would have this Bible and she'd be on her knees kneeling in front of him on his hardwood floors, and he would just, you know, read from this Bible all this bullshit. Sorry, just a bunch of bullshit from this Bible. And my mom would have to kneel in front of him and listen, and after the hours of lectures, he would always beat her afterwards. But she didn't want to. She didn't want to go through the lectures. So she would say, you know, hurry up, beat me. And I get it now, like you just want to get it over with, but my dad had to go through his whole thing, you know, where he lectured her and told her how evil she was, and, you know, called her a slut and a whore and a bitch, and she had to, you know, she had to listen to all that before she got beat. So I would listen to that. I would listen to her begging him. I would listen to him beat her. And when I heard that, you know, he had these drumsticks that he liked to beat her over the head with, because he was also a musician. And, you know, the pitch of her scream would change when he would start to beat her with his. And I remember that. It was so clear. And then I remember what it sounded like when he would begin to rape her. And how after a while she would just grow quiet, and all you could hear was the slap of skin on skin. And when I heard that, I was like 4, 5, 6, and 7. That was like a nightly thing, where my father would beat my mother and that's how it's going. I'll talk about that later. My father, he was abused as well. I found out that when he was I'm actually not sure how old, but he was taken to visit his grandmother, and he had an aunt there as well, and his aunt starved him and kept him tied up. And when he would say that he was hungry, she would force him to perform oral sex on her. And when I found that out, you know, there was other things, other abuses, but that one specifically, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense about what happened to me. Okay, so the starving wasn't just because we were poor or anything like that. My father starved me, you know, because that's what happened to him. That's how he was abused. And, you know, when people teach you how to be terrible, that's what you learn. And so that's what he learned. Things were pretty bad for a long time. My sisters, I had two sisters, a middle sister and the older sister. And he kept us separated in a way, like, you know, they went out to go to school. I really didn't go to school. He beat me, broke my bones, my nose, my ribs. He starved me. And I don't know what happened before I was born, but I always felt like the sexual abuse that I went through was maybe worse than what my sisters, what happened to them, but I don't know, you know, because I was too young to know. There was some things that happened where he was sexually abusing me and my sisters together, but those things that happened never seemed as bad as what he did when it was just me and him alone. So yeah, when I was growing up, it was hell, and a really beautiful place. It was so beautiful. I got to see Lake Michigan so much. We didn't have any running water in our house because the pipes froze one winter, so we would actually go bathe in Lake Michigan and get buckets of water from there and carry them back to the house so we could flush the toilet. Like, I know every time I was bathing out of a bucket, it was water from Lake Michigan. Grew up rough. I mean, the house was open, the walls, no insulation. We had this kerosene heater. We had dogs. I had a dog. His name was Storm. He was a good dog. You know, he used to warn me when I was in the woods. He would warn me if my father was nearby. You know, so I could hide a little deeper. He was a good dog until my father killed him right in front of me. It was more of that. You know, when he's gonna lash out, what he's gonna do, and that was pretty horrific. It takes a long time to get death. It does, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So I remember sitting there on my couch. My bed, whatever, it was a couch, but it was my bed. And I was sitting there, the dog is tied up to the kitchen table, because remember my couch was in the kitchen, and you know, he's beating my dog with his broomstick until he breaks his back. But he's still alive. And so my dad unchains him and picks him up and takes both of his front legs and just like a what is that, like a wishbone, a turkey? You know what you do? Yeah, so he did that. And after that, I was pretty much alone because I told you my mom didn't hug me. My sisters didn't pay attention to me. You know, they just liked to get me in trouble. There was this separation that he caused between us where my sisters, they like to go tell him I did something when I didn't do it so they could just watch me get beat. Like he liked to, I guess, have them as like spies or something. I don't know what it was. I still don't understand, I guess, that part of it. But there's enough that I do understand now. So since my dog was dead, and that was like, you know, I guess the only comfort I had when I was a kid, the only thing that kept me warm, you know, he couldn't really hug me, but he would cuddle with me. And so I knew something. I knew that, you know, there was warmth in the world. It wasn't as bad as where I was with him in hell. I just had to get out of there. And eventually, when I was 7, my mom left him. And let me tell you, by the time I was 7, it was too fucking late. It was too late. She should have left him before I was born. Or, I don't know, but it was too late for me. Have a chance. So she left him. We went to this place called the Safe Shelter. It was and we were there for a couple months. We got an apartment in this town called South Haven. And now remember, I didn't really go to school. I was in no condition to go to school. Like, I was starving. I was constantly full of bruises. I didn't even have clothes to fit me. The couple of times I went to school, I would dress in my older sister's clothes, but they were 2 and 3 years older than me, and plus I was really undersized for my age because I was so skinny. And so when I started going to school after my mom left my dad, they quickly found out that I did not know how to read, and I didn't know anything. Matter of fact, when I was They didn't even think I spoke English. They put me in this group with like the English second language kids, and I guess they didn't understand that I speak English perfectly. I just don't speak because I spent many years not speaking and just trying to be quiet. I had a lot of conversations with myself in my head during that time, but I never spoke out loud to somebody, so I wasn't even used to using my voice. So at this time, I'm like 8, still can't read, but I'm like enthralled with the world. All this